What's shaking, cats and kittens? I'm Rob Lee from Getting to the Truth in This Art. And this podcast is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Bazaar. Bazaar is a gift shop for those seeking the strange and unusual. Got morbid curiosity? Got an interest in natural history? Bazaar's got you covered. Bazaar specializes in antique medical equipment, jewelry, prints, funerary antiques, and many other morbid gifts. The inventory is ever-changing. I'm wearing a great death's head moth pin, and I'm enjoying this hand-poured candle called Overgrown Cemetery. It's great. It has the studio smelling awesome. Head on over to 3534 Chestnut Avenue in Baltimore, it's in that Hamden neighborhood, and see what they got to offer at Bazaar. Tell them Rob Lee sent you. Welcome to Getting to the Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today's guest is a local and regional brewing quality assurance expert, Michelle McHugh. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, yes, I'm going to get right down to it because we were talking a little bit beforehand and we have some commonalities, and you have a really good sense of humor. You're an audio person.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you're into wrestling.
I'll take it.
Yes. But real quick, one of the things I like to do is early on, just get like I can say something in a very 3,000 foot kind of view of this is what you do. But I'd rather let you kind of break down what you do, whether it be because you have a creative thing, too. And I didn't really touch on that, but you have the day job. You have what you're pursuing creatively, too. So speak on that, please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, to start, the role of kind of quality assurance management and quality control in brewing is something I've been doing for almost 7 years now. Mm-hmm. I've worked at a couple breweries regionally, obviously, as we said. And the biggest part of it is ensuring the exact thing that you brewed because you love it and you brewed it again because you love it. And then that third time you brew it is to make sure the client or the consumer gets exactly what it is you're appreciating. Yeah. And that's why quality assurance and quality control exists, honestly. And it's everything from the raw ingredients management and testing to your fermentation and making sure, even though you've brewed the beer 1,000 times, maybe that less than that. Let's see, everyone's young around here brewery wise, but you've brewed the beer this many times, but you still have to track those same yeast cells that you've used time and time again, the same generation of yeast cells time and time again, and how it's fermenting properly, even at the same temperature you always ferment it at. Yeah. It's the little things like that at each step of the process that you have to watch, even as much as you know about it. You have to watch and guarantee that everything meets your standards and those specs and parameters that you have for consistency. Yeah. And a lot of it also deals with, I'm not going to say safety exactly, but quality managers tend to somehow fall into a role of safety guide, safety management, but it is all related, honestly. If you go to any food plant, anything like that, a huge portion of your quality, or even the FDA, if you're trying to approve something, if you look at what has to happen to have a certain approval level, it comes down to quality. Mm-hmm. And all of that is inclusive of your food safety, the manufacturing safety, and consistency and repeatability and proof of all of those parameters actually being checked. Mm-hmm. So that's a larger scale, but to tone it back a bit for what I do on a daily basis, the stuff I said before, but also just monitoring a fermentation, cellaring, our barrel aging program, kind of special project oversight, and process design, process innovation, and looking at chemical utilization, and a lot of data analysis, data input, and making sure kind of figuring out, it's always moving. The technology for any industry, but definitely brewing, it's generally kind of a same even keel thing, depending on the equipment you have, as long as you can master that equipment. But just like anything, the technology and the ways to innovate and do recipes differently. You have your West Coast IPA, however many, almost a decade ago, to the New England IPA coming in around 5 years ago and totally changing the way people look at consumers mostly. And then back to brewers, because they're like, oh, well, crap, we have to make that now. Or we have to learn how to master that and be better than the next brewery. Those styles are changing. It's all the same premise and principle to begin with. Yeah. But it's learning how to utilize the same 4 or 5 ingredients and make them do all those crazy things for each different possible end result. And quality control oversees that and make sure every kind of testing we need is in line to do the research on it and the trials for these new things, or just your regular consistent brands. And then being able to look at it and say, okay, let's make this tweak next time, or let's try this, or we met our marks, and then let's go on to the next phase of tracking the product, whether that's shelf life testing. And obviously sensory is a huge part of all of this. Sensory analytics. And the biggest question I get when I tell people what I do is, oh, so you get to drink beer all day? No, no, that is definitely an important part of it. But let me say it is very structured, very regulated under my own control personally. Because no, we do not at all. I have never encouraged overindulging at work. There's some days where it's like, all right, we have everything done. You know what? Let's pop a beer an hour earlier than we normally would. Yeah. But as far as the sensory, that's the biggest tool, and it's the end all be all and the easiest thing you can do, I guess, is tasting your beer and figuring out where you need to taste it and for what reasons, to make sure you have the best outcoming products, the most consistent products of what you already have, and just to make sure it's good. I mean, you have to taste it, new product or not, you have to taste it and make sure it's true to brand. And it's something you feel comfortable handing to a buddy or handing to a stranger and saying, this is my product. Like, my heart and soul are on the line for this thing I'm about to hand you. And it damn well better be the best version of what I can offer you.
That's so important. Like, long
story short, that's very, I guess that was a very broad summarization of what I do.
No, that's great. Yeah. I think that's important. Like, when I enjoy beer, and I think when you get a product, and even like when you're consuming something, like, 'cause I don't want to make it specific to beer, but there is a restaurant that I will not name because sponsors. No, there's a restaurant I will not name, but they do chicken or what have you, and it's a couple that are local. They have maybe 3 locations, and that initial location, that flagship, you can see something has changed in the recipe. And I'm very taste oriented. I know what's going on. I was like, nope. And this is exactly where you screwed up at. Then when I try the other location, I see that both under the same name, both representing the same place, both having the same goodwill or baggage. And then the other place is doing so much better. And it's like, oh, they didn't change something. You guys screwed up. And even the quality of the batter on the chicken it's not consistent. It's just like a shell of batter now. And it's like, in a place of parity, because we're, in the chicken sandwich wars of the late 2020s or the early 2020s, and we're going into the fish wars.
One more Thin Mint for the history books of 2020.
So with all of that stuff, when we have like parity and everyone can come out with their version, and that's what I was thinking about when you were describing like if this is becoming the new hotness in the brewing scene, then, well, this brewery has to have their version of it, and this place needs to have theirs. I just noticed that everyone has like a seltzer now, and I've noticed that nonsense.
So like from the standpoint, or I guess the object of the chicken place you're talking about, that whether or not it sounds like the breading or the sauce was the direct thing that made you question, like, oh, something's not right. So that's the forefront of there's a quality issue here, but quality management is sitting back and knowing you have multiple locations trying to push out the exact same product, the same brand. They have to take every single measure possible. Of course, I don't know what that means for fried chicken or chicken. I wish I did. I mean, hey, I'd make it way too much and I'd weigh a hell of a lot more than I do now, but proudly. But that has to come from the whole concept of quality management from above. Of, okay, we may have slightly different equipment at these places, but we know this is the recipe, and we're going to have to try this and that this many times. If, say, we get a new fryer, or we get a new even brand of whatever little ingredient that goes into the breading. That's the idea of quality assurance and quality control. The control being all of those various little checkpoints. And the assurance being the management of those checkpoints. But as far as like doing something that's hype, I guess, or do it because it's what's selling more than the other thing. It is really common, obviously, that, and in breweries as well, especially with the coronavirus, people are just trying to make whatever money they can. And there are places where maybe they didn't want to go down the seltzer route ahead of time before all of this, or restaurants, I'm sure they didn't want to go down a certain, whatever the equivalent is of, well, we don't like hazy IPAs as a brewery. We want to make traditional German styles or whatever equivalent that is for certain restaurants, or different types of food. You get to the point of, well, let's try it. Obviously it's selling, and those differences of the good product lies within how much research you're doing, who you have on your team to be able to do proper research, and really the ability to trial a product, every aspect of it, and develop the controls for each part of that new project and meet them more than once, the repeatability, to be able to make it something you can offer to consumers. And it's not common for a lot of places. A lot of the places around here in Maryland and Baltimore, a lot of stuff is very small scale. And that's how it is for a ton of microbreweries, the however many thousand, probably close to 10,000 there are in the country. So many of them, it's, if you can make beer that isn't directly spoiling when you're serving it to customers. And I don't mean this as an insult at all. It's a very practical thing, because beer is a pretty stable product as far as contaminants and microbiological contaminants. But people are going to go for it based on what they have at their hands to try to establish these quality measures or not. And not everyone has the kind of staffing dedicated to making sure that quality is in line. But you do what you have to do. I mean, and if you have a good client base, which a lot of places do, and you prove that you can make good stuff, go for it. Try it. If you don't have the money to dump a batch because you're experimenting, go for it. Advertise it as such, or however you need to, and see the reaction, and then go from there. That's some of what people have to work with. And that comes back to the sensory. It really is, you're your best, the first and foremost way to determine something's gone right or gone really wrong or poorly. Yeah, I mean, it's stressful. Personally, as someone who's been in the industry as long as I have, and I'm very in the like academia world of it, not my own background, but with all that I've researched and learned and stuff I work with and a lot that I contribute to as far as all of these new technologies. I'm like, oh, I wish all of these places, because I know they have great product and they have great people running their staff and all of that, had the ability at their disposal to run just even a few trial runs. Even if the product comes out great the first time, it's just something I wish for everyone. And a lot of those folks still do a great job without someone like me in a position there, I guess. But yeah.
So let's switch gears. We're going to get back to the creative things. I got to create a question in there. We can get back into your stuff. Yeah. Take a swig. I was
trying to keep it out of the sound waves.
No. It's got to be in the sound waves. So see, so let's see. Well, actually, we're going to talk about beer, but in a different way. Like my first three questions, you already kind of covered, so that's great. So I'm gonna modify this one a little bit, and this might be hard.
Go for it.
What are your favorite styles of beer? Maybe your top 3 favorite styles of beer, because I'm going to steal this from you once you say it.
That's totally fine. The first thing I'll say is they waver.
Okay.
They go through cycles. Right now, I would probably say, oh shit.
I feel like that's an IPA, maybe. I'm not sure.
Saying oh shit.
Yeah.
No, I love traditional Belgian whites.
Okay. On the same page.
And triples. I love Belgian beer. Second to that, I would say probably Mexican lagers. Traditional, like Vienna, basically Vienna lagers, but are in the Mexican tradition. So they're a little bit darker, but also light. My guilty pleasure is like macro produced Mexican lagers. Okay. Not like Corona, not in a bottle. No. Because it has that whole skunking situation, which is science, which I would love to explain. It's not every off flavor is a beer being skunked, but I appreciate people using that term as saying something doesn't seem right. So I'll take it. But yeah, I love Mexican lagers. I guess as a quick third, I love Pilsners. Something that I haven't had in a while, but I really enjoy when I have it. Ooh. Probably black lagers.
Okay.
Like Schwarzbiers.
I've never partaken.
An example of one is Blackwing by Union.
Okay.
That's a good one. Yeah. It's just a malty. I also love ESBs. But there aren't too many local or really craft options of that. Mm-hmm. Or there hasn't been in a long time, but, black lagers are just like a very malty, light bodied, mm-hmm. But if you almost think of a Guinness, but there's, to a black lager, I would say, especially a craft made one, there is more to it. There's more body. It's very chocolatey, very smooth. If you can almost think of something like a nitro beer, but not. Yeah. Which that beer is like, that style of beer is great, nitrogenized or slow pour. But it's like a lighter bodied beer, but a lot going on to it. And that like dark chocolatey, dark malt like toasted bread, biscuity type thing.
Yeah.
And you don't have to feel too badly about it because it's low ABV. The calories are lower, but
you're giving yourself another job now. I'm just like, hey, so I'm going to need like Michelle to provide me like beer suggestions for what I'm going to eat. Oh, biscuits.
I can solve.
Also, when you said chocolate and malty, I was like, that's my autobiography title. How did you find that out? I'm working on it currently. I'm making it now. It's just
it's not going to work for me to take that from you, but like I would find a way to get something similar because that is pretty damn good. I mean, I'll cheers myself on that.
I'll tell you this one that happened at one of the other shows as we were talking about it earlier. I was just like, I just feel like vegans are looking down on me from that cauliflower tower, and it was it was great.
Next trending hashtag.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a thing. I'm going to be famous.
I hope so.
So let's talk about the creativity a little bit. I got some wrestling questions too.
Okay.
So creatively, what are your passions, and when did you realize you had talent in those areas? Like, I'm passionate about certain things, but I suck at those things I'm passionate about. So I might not do them. But you have some talent out there that I've seen, and you're good. But I'll let you speak on it, please.
Thank you. And I totally get there's so many things I want to learn to do. I feel like I could be really good at, but everyone is where they are, and that's okay. Work with what you have already, and then see what you can add on. But yeah, I've been a musician of sorts. I'll say that since I can remember. Mm-hmm. I've played piano and guitar since I was about 8 years old. So basically my whole life. Yeah. And then singing is my forte, I guess, pun intended, dumb. But yeah, I'm a classically trained singer, a coloratura soprano. My voice never really my speaking voice never adds up to that. But yeah, I think even people have asked me this before, and my parents have one answer of when there was kind of a click of when I knew, or when they could tell I knew that I had talent singing. My first memory of feeling, oh, like, this sounds so terrible, but I'm like superior to these people in singing. I know that sounds so bad.
I mean, I think it all the time, just about general things.
The first moment or recollection I have of that was in preschool. We had this like preschool graduation little ceremony where we sang What a Wonderful World. Mm-hmm. And I remember doing like maybe one day or 1 hour, however long you're in preschool for, of rehearsal for this, and just like singing out and realizing I was following the tune mm-hmm. really well. I remember that to this day. I'm also like creepily good with memory, but I very strongly remember even that like rehearsal day before the actual thing, thinking like, I'm going to sing out and sing proudly because I get it. I'm doing this, yeah. If that makes any sense. And then my mom and my dad have kind of always attributed that moment of realization to a sixth grade talent show when I was in like 3 different things. You were only supposed to be in one. Yeah. And I like accompanied people on piano. I did this tiny little bit in another skit, like an American Idol skit. And then I did my own song. And that was when my parents kind of felt, they're like, oh yeah, she's meant to be on stage. But it was way before that mm-hmm. I had the urge from a very young age, being, I think 5, to want to play guitar. And I remember my little brother, God, I was probably around 6 at this time. My little brother got this dinky, like fake guitar type toy that you can't actually tune or anything.
Yeah.
But I remember being genuinely upset because I was like, I want to play guitar. Like, I want to learn how to do this. And I even took that little dinky thing and tried to do something with it. But anyway, it has been a lifelong kind of just known thing for me. And I'm really glad. Obviously, I found a career that I'm equally as passionate about. Music will always be first, but it was a godsend to like walk into my last brewery with no experience saying, I know you need help. And I was working retail and kind of like I had quit my previous job and wasn't ready to audition at places for like classical voice, which the idea down the line, as when I was a kid, I wanted to go on to get a PhD in musicology or music theory or music education. But things have played out the way they have. And I'm able to combine very frequently the passion that I have for my career, the science, all of that with I play gigs for breweries.
That's great.
I've made a lot of connections through brewing. I met the person who led me to you through brewing, and so on and so forth. That's kind of my has been my window into Baltimore, but also in Northern Virginia, where I came from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a whole family of, oh, we know Michelle, like have her play something or have her play that gig or can recommend whoever or can consult for you for your brewing quality program. So yeah, it's been my whole life and I'm very grateful for it. And the little windows that come about, that I can really put more towards the music than I normally would in the everyday. And I'm in one of those moments right now, which I'm really grateful for. Yeah. So just balancing the passion and motivation.
That's great. So I have a wrestling question. And then I'll be remiss if I don't have it in here. I have a few Baltimore related questions and then that'll be that. So the wrestling question, this is going to be challenging. I was going to keep it open-ended, but because you're a wrestling fan and I know how
I'll put it this, I haven't watched Elimination Chamber yet. Okay. I was completely passed out. Sunday night. And I have it on, of course, I subscribe to WWE Network. So I have it on queue for tonight. I haven't watched it yet. I feel like a DB for not watching it yet. So just don't. I know all the cards that were on there, but I have not watched yet. And I feel very embarrassed.
So here's the sheets. No. So this is the question I have, because I think like I listened to a wrestling podcast called SW Review, and they review old school wrestling. And they have a thing that they do at the beginning of with where their listeners will email them or contact them in any way. And they'll say, this is who's in my boys stable. And pretty much the criteria is this person could not have won a championship, but you still rock with them. They're still like your guy. And it's like, all right, cool. So I want to rip that off a little bit here, but here's the parameters. Who are, let's say, a handful of your favorite wrestlers based on this criteria: in ring, promo ability, and how they're packaged. And we can keep it to WWE and we can keep it to current if you like. So it'll be a little mix because I really don't have that much of a fandom background per se. Sure. There was a very small amount of time when I was in middle school in 8th grade where my brother and I out of nowhere got, it was because the boys who sat in front and behind me in my English class in 8th grade were very into it. So my brother and I, with whatever cable we had at the time, started watching SmackDown. Gotcha. And that's all we had access to. But so it was then, and then a tiny bit after 8th grade. And then like a year and a half ago, I got back into it only. But I've been so going back and forth. So I would say I've been doing my research, I guess. Right now, I would say Drew McIntyre.
is one of my favorites. Whether it's how much he's playing into the baby face or kind of what I believe to be more his actual like authenticity, based on all the whatever documentaries that I've watched on him. One of the main things he explains is how for a long time it was just kind of passing by. Obviously he had a problem with alcohol and that kind of thing, but just like, all right, I'll go with these characters they're throwing at me. But he always makes a point now to say like, there was a change of there's very little between my, whether it's behind the scenes character or in ring character, Drew McIntyre versus Drew Galloway, which I respect. I mean, I think he's a beast. Like, and I know how much they steroid test. So it's like, it's kind of a modern day respect of like, oh shit. Like that is a large dude.
You look like a different guy now.
Yeah. But he seems authentic and like a good person in the same way John Cena is. I mean, John Cena is another that like, I didn't necessarily have on the list as like all-time favorite wrestler, because most of his heyday, like some of it was when I was watching as a kid, but he was on Raw. I didn't have access to that. And there was a huge span in between, but he is another person that fulfills, I think, more Make-A-Wish Foundation requests than any other person or any other celebrity. I'm pretty sure I haven't looked in a while, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
That's like a stat. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I feel like Drew McIntyre has a very similar authenticity to him to do good for people. So I really like that. And in ring, I mean, I think he does a really good job.
Yeah.
He's entertaining to watch. As far as a few other people, obviously Undertaker. I mean, it seems kind of cliche to say that, but he is someone who has spanned the decades he has and all of the different eras in wrestling and been able to take, and not even for championships. Like it was never about the number of times he's held a belt. It was his persona and the character, kind of like what I felt they were trying to bring the Fiend into, like that direction, where it's like your presence and your necessity for the league is your character. Yeah. And you're just there, you're lingering or you're in the present, and it's not about belts. It's about, all right, who are you going to mentally be there with and against? So that's what I love about Undertaker, and just the dedication to the character throughout all of that, and the business throughout all of that. And the injury and even I feel like, obviously I've watched all the documentaries on him, and the Joe Rogan interview actually was pretty good. I'm not a big fan of Joe Rogan per se. But it was cool to hear Undertaker's interview, because that was the first time in all of the behind the scenes interviews and documentaries he's done in the past like a year and a half. That was the first time it was uncensored. And I actually heard things I hadn't heard about him on that. So I recommend that. Okay. But yeah, Undertaker, it's just a pure dedication to the fans and like never failing that character. Right. Which big. I really enjoy. And yeah, just his being as part of the character he was, this massive, massive guy, was entertaining. And then I would say after that, it's probably Edge.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, he's one that I didn't really have a lot of access to watching. Yeah.
And gone for a better part of a decade too.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, when he made that comeback for Royal Rumble 2020, I mean, I felt it. I hardly knew the background of Edge, and I felt that pop. Excitement and energy when he you think you know me, and everyone lost it. Like I've watched that over and over again, just that moment, that minute or so throughout this year. I feel like I'd be embarrassed to admit how many times if I knew how many times. But Edge is another one who, he, in everything he does and what I've looked at, what he used to do and what he's done currently, it is just a pure joy and like thriving on the crowd and the people he does it for. Yeah. It's not just the athleticism. It's not being ready for your match or having whatever belt, being the heel or baby face. He does it for the crowd. And like, he was breaking down into tears when he came out there for that Royal Rumble entrance for the first time in 9 years. So yeah, I would say those three as a broad start. Okay. Just the people with just over, what's the right word? It's passion that succeeds any character they're playing or any written part of the storyline. They could have the same character, obviously, but like you can see their passion beyond whatever they're supposed to be doing according to Vince for the next few months or between pay-per-views or any of that, that's I think what really stands out to me about them is just that passion and dedication. Okay. And I can relate to it in what I do. Totally. And it seems it's their life. It's their lives and playing those characters and playing for the people.
Yeah. It's something that's admirable about it and admirable about really being serious about what you're doing and putting in that work, that effort. And it definitely resonates in terms of, you're going to do a little bit better at your promo because it feels like this is closer to you and you have some stake in it, some skin in the game. And you're going to be, at least in the conversation about how you're packaged and how you're presented to an audience, because you're like, this is me, and not in like a crazy way, but like, no, this is me. And then the in-ring has to be there. You don't want to put on a crappy match. And that definitely resonates when you mentioned, Undertaker or what have you. It's like, towards the end, his body was breaking down and all of that stuff. Oh, yeah. But, that desire to kind of keep coming back. It's just like, I can kind of do better. This one wasn't as good and so on. So
even when he was wrong and knew it would be bad for him. Yeah. It's like, it's the passion that you can definitely see in any industry you're doing, just like what I do. And it sounds like what you do. It's, just in the example, I think it best shines through and it's most relatable through those people that I mentioned in wrestling, because it is the full picture and you embody it.
I need AJ Styles in a cinematic match. And I need to come out to Metallica and there we go.
AJ gets on my nerves quite a bit, but I've gotten better about it. Gotten better. But if there's ever a time I'm like, unless it's someone I just really don't like, Nia Jax.
She interests people.
She is, before the whole recent thing. Nice. I feel like she's just, it's like either you're playing a bully. I don't see a purpose for her character. As much as I hate to say that, obviously she's pretty skilled in what she does. Yeah. But she's one of the people where I'm just like, just come on. The storyline isn't good. It's just not, it's not providing anything.
They had nothing
but
for you.
That's kind of raw right now. But yeah, AJ, he was one. He was one that took a while. And it's, with the exception of the few, like I just was going on to say, it's good when there are people are really skilled and you've supported before that you can't stand because they're doing their damn job. They are being the heel they're supposed to be.
Doing a super,
which again is passion. Yeah. Which is good.
So now we got the wrestling stuff, and I can see your wrestling podcast is going to do very well.
Thank you.
So hint, hashtag hint. So Baltimore, because like I said before, I'd be remiss if I don't have that in there. Yeah. quickly. What would you say is if you were to summarize it like in a sentence or so, what would you say is great about Baltimore?
Authenticity.
I kind of say the same thing. It's good.
I would say authenticity and a sense of community, even though it's a broken community. And that authenticity, this is something I kind of said back and forth in emails quickly, just like, I think it stays that way because a lot of people come and they don't stay. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people who've been here, they come back, whether it's from college or whatever, and they stick around because they know what they're in for. And they know that authenticity. And it's a really great and unique thing. But my issue with that, I guess, it's a huge positive because in my mind, it's like, how long have we been able to keep this industrial, like blue collar, I would say, environment, and that including African Americans, to have some of the same ownership of restaurants and in all the parts of the city, mm-hmm. Versus like new industry has failed here mm-hmm. because of pretty glaring issues here, mm-hmm. Which is not something to be fond of at all. But I would say, and it's troubling, obviously, that those issues don't seem to find relief in the areas that really need it here. Mm-hmm. And that coexistence that I kind of briefly said in the email. But it certainly adds to and continues that feeling of authenticity, where you're going to go to a bar or you're going to be recommended the best, even like lake trout place. Yeah. That's been the staple of that, or staple for it, for decades and decades, because people may not come in here and develop, or if they try to, it doesn't last. Mm-hmm. So it's a mix of good and bad that adds to that authenticity. Sure. Which I hate the bad parts of it, but I do think that's very special here. Mm-hmm. And I think it sticks out to anyone that comes here and visits more and more, or time and time again. But again, there's definitely a negative attached to it. Yeah. But it's something I think about as to why I love it here.
Yeah, I think that's it's realism there. And we get sometimes these sanitized imagery as to this is what Baltimore is, and it's very specific to whether it be the area, whether it be this, whether it be that, and it's the touristy things, and it has a certain color, whether it be skin color or whether it be brightness to it. And it's like, the city is broader than that. And in part, that's what I aim to do in this podcast, and just showing like, we have a little bit of everything here and all really types of people.
Yeah. And stereotypes will be everywhere. Yeah. And that's what sucks. But it's like, even the amount of time, me and my parents have been Northern Virginia, and my dad grew up in Maryland, kind of Chesapeake Bay based their entire lives. And always, like, before the Senators went away, always came to Camden Yards. I went to Camden Yards growing up before the Nats came back, or before the Washington baseball team came back. And it's like, this place was no stranger to them at all, but it was still a convincing of, hey, there is so much more to anything you hear on the news. And that is so stressful, just being here and trying to explain that. But also, I'm insanely grateful to have the opportunity to right people's wrongs. Yeah. Considering, obviously the crime is there. It's terrible. And that is the fault of folks who are not in those areas, or like not, mm-hmm. It's not the people's fault. That is above them. Yeah. I think personally, and that's a whole long discussion, but I do take honor in being able to try to explain and give a voice to Baltimore, including like, yeah, those areas are bad, but you know what? There are also a lot of things building there with those people there. And they're part of this whole culture that has so much else to offer. Mm-hmm. And I love being able to say that about this place. I love it here.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
And there is so much.
So the last question I have, before I give you an opportunity to shamelessly plug anything, as we talked about earlier. So kind of, if you were to get the ear of somebody that's in a decision-making position and mm-hmm. They ask you creatively, what does Baltimore need more of? How would you answer that? Because we have a lot of creatives here, but
we do. It's insane.
We always hear about funding, and as you touched on earlier, people tend to leave, and especially in that creative space. Like I used to ask this question on the podcast a lot early on of who is our pop culture representative, mm-hmm. And it's not many. So
no, and
that's the
thing. I think we're in a spot where there wouldn't really be one. I mean, obviously we have John Waters, but like that is a generation passing on. It's a great legacy.
Yeah.
As a representation, but even with that, a lot of negative connotations come because of what he was depicting, which wasn't wrong.
Yeah, true.
You know, I'm not sure. I mean, we have plenty of art functions that happen when the world isn't in a pandemic, which is how I met a lot of people. And I'm not sure, like, if it's more regional, possibly advertising to platforms of the kind of art we have locally. I'm not sure how that could even work, but from a large perspective, just like the Visionary Arts Museum, that's one of the coolest places ever. How does that place get to more regularly advertise to people, even directly outside of this area? Obviously I'm not in the target market because I live here, but, I don't know, stuff like that on the bigger scale, but reaching out. Do you know of the Sowebo market?
No.
Or this like Sowebo Art Festival, which is right by, it's not Lexington Market. I'm gonna sound like an idiot, but do you know where Lithuanian Hall is?
I do. Yeah.
It's right by there, that little market area there.
Okay.
And that neighborhood, I believe, is called Sowebo.
Okay. And
it used to be annually in the summer or like early summer, there would be an art festival there. And that is West Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And I was able to go to that because two of my buddies had vendor stands there. And it was so diverse. And it was the people coming to it were diverse. It wasn't just like, oh, this little cute, like crafty arts thing and it's all white people. Like this was actually a diverse crowd.
Yeah.
I felt it was awesome because people came from like where I live in Canton or like Patterson Park area. We were the fewer.
Yeah. You're in my neighborhood then.
Yeah. And it was awesome because it was a true mixing of like, okay, this seems like we're in the neighborhood of people who are actually here attending this.
Yeah.
Because it's here.
Mm-hmm.
And more of that needs to happen, I think. And I don't know what goes into that or what positions are available for leadership roles to make those kind of things happen more, but just more diverse because that's a word, diverse neighborhoods. Or more diversity in the neighborhoods in which these things are hosted. I
think you're right in that, because I had Rebecca Hoffberger from the founder of AVAM on the first episode of this season, and that was really, really cool. And we had a great conversation. At one point, she said that I should work on an installation about the thong song. This was a conversation.
Hell yeah.
This was a real conversation, and she was great. It was great to.
What is it, Drew Hill?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she gave me a really
things.
funny anecdote about being on a flight with Cisco, and it was a great conversation. And I think like that's a place that's been around for 25, 26 years. And you know, my own ignorance, I had never been there before, and I was invited personally by her like a week later.
I still haven't been, which is my own fault. But like I had no idea about it when I lived even in Northern Virginia, an hour away from here. I had no idea about that.
It's like great. It's
an awesome museum.
Yeah. And I think like I think you're right. And I think one of the things that I hear a lot about what it needs more of is people don't see it as an opportunity to advance as a creative, like whether they don't feel the support, they don't get the funding or what have you, and they could go to Philadelphia, they could go to New York and, you know, somehow lose that Baltimore identity. And it's just, I was discovered. It's like, you've been doing art for like 15 years already. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I do actually, I would attest to that. Like, I know a ton of artists here personally, and I know there's so many more, and there are some outlets for them, but I would have to agree that I don't know what any kind of Baltimore artist general identity would look like, or representation. Obviously each artist is different. They're individual in their style, their conceptions, but that is true. To think of like, oh, that's the Philly art scene, or that's like the Vegas art scene, all the pop artists out there. Like I don't think that necessarily, maybe in like the graffiti and like street art type sense, it's some of that there, but I would agree that maybe that identity isn't as structured as it could be. I don't know what it would take to get that.
I think it needs to be amplified. And I think this podcast here is a little slice to try to do that.
Hell yeah.
Just a small slice, a sliver, if you will. So that's the end of my questions. And this has been fantastical. And that's not a word.
I've heard it before, so I'm going to act like it is.
Fair. So please plug away. What do you got? Social media, all of that good stuff. What do you got?
Well, my one thing, he mentioned a podcast, but that's coming down the road, and I don't have all the titles squared away for copyright purposes yet. Maybe in a few months, but you can find me on Instagram at Singing Alewife. So that's singing as in singing a song, ale as in beer, ALE, and wife as in a wife, which I am not. But an alewife, just fun trivia fact. That's the old terminology from way back in the day, because brewers were predominantly female.
Oh, well. Back
in the medieval to about late 1700s, early 1800s, brewers were predominantly female, also known as brewsters. But anyway, find me on Instagram. It's Singing Alewife. And my name is Michelle McHugh. You could look that up and find me other places. Not sure where that'll lead you. Maybe my really old YouTube channel that hasn't been touched in at least 6 years. I mean, there's still some okay stuff music wise, but I look slightly different, a lot younger. But anyway, that's it. Just Singing Alewife.
So
on Instagram.
So that's it. So thank you, Michelle. And I'll say this real quick. So for Michelle McHugh, I am Rob Lee, saying that there's art, tasty beer, tasty beer. In and around Baltimore, you just got to have someone consult you to point you in the right direction towards it. Takeout is cool, but delivery gets pricey. So, like a phoenix from the ashes, indoor dining is back at Forge Eatery. I use the analogy because the food is fire. It's a new approach to farm to table. No overalls, just dope food. Try my favorites, like the mushroom stew with pine nuts and ricotta, the cornmeal fried happy oysters, and the seared duck breast. Also, Ask about the chocolate chip cookie tins. Mini chocolate chip cookies with a dusting of sea salt. Simply delicious. Head on over to forgedeatery.com to check out the current menu options and make a reservation today. Forged is located at 3520 Chestnut Avenue in Hamden.